Hello, in this video, I'm going to take some of these LED bead strings, add a D1 Mini and a little ESP home code to make them do this. First of all, the variables. I've pre-cut this, and this is 14 holes down by 22 across, and the tracks there are horizontal. Now I'm going to be using the D1 Mini in sockets. We can use the variables to make sure that they're straight. As you can see there, that's not straight, so come out another row of pins. As always, we'll start from one corner, we've got a nice bead of solder on there, and then we'll do the other side, and we'll just check to see if that's square. That looks square to me. Right then, that's the pins done, and it looks nice and square-ish. Next up, I'm going to put this in sockets, because they're cheap enough to replace these boards, and the fact that you can blow them up quite easily. As for the diagram up here, I'm going to leave 2 holes in from the right and 1 up from the bottom. So you can see there, 2 in from the right and then 1 up from the bottom. Keep the D1 Mini in the sockets while I solder the first couple of pins, just to keep everything square. So let's go through it. As always, do the corners first and let's do the rest of the pins. A quick visual inspection just to make sure there's no shorts between those tracks there. And I think that's good. Next job, we need to isolate left and right here. And as always, 4mm drill bit. So I'm going to take D1 Mini out, and I'm going to do every track in between these pairs of pins and also in the middle. Let's finish up. Old toothbrush. And that looks good. Clean up my mat. As you can see in the diagram, our next stage is to cut a few more holes. So again, with the D1 Mini socket on the right, I'm going to leave a space at the top here. I'm going to cut the first 2. First 2 there. Then I'm going to leave 1 and cut the rest. All the way down to the bottom there. So there you go. We've got everyone in between the top 2, or rather the bottom 2. But looking at the bottom of the board, the top 2 miss 1, and then the rest all the way down to the bottom of the D1 Mini socket. Right, that's done. So again, we'll turn the board back over this way. Now, originally this project, I was using BC548s. I've since changed it, I've updated it to these things. These are a 2N7000 or 2N7000. And these are N-channel MOSFETs. And we're going to be using 3 of them, 1 for each one of our channels. So back on the board, I'm going to leave a space of 7. So starting from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we're going to pop in the MOSFET there. Directly below it, in the next hole down, put a second one. And then directly below that, I'm going to put a third one. And then we're going to attempt to solder these in. Now I'm going to solder the middle pins first. That will hold the MOSFETs in. And then we can line them up in a second. So blob of solder, just to get everything nice and tinned. So blob of solder in the middle one, and then using the mat I can just move that back like that, so that's reasonably straight now, and we'll do the same for the other 2. So to get the middle one, we're going to miss 2 pins, go to that one, and then while we're here I'm going to do the third one, and then we can straighten up these other 2 afterwards. That's all the MOSFETs in, and now we can straighten them up. So I'm just going to put my thumb on the MOSFET there, remelt the pin, and then I can move it to line it up, and then this time I'll try and get it on camera for you. So I'm going to heat up the middle pin and then just move that so that they're all nicely lined up there, and then we can do the other legs. Right, so that's our MOSFETs in. I'm going to bend these forward ever so slightly, because the next job is adding 10k resistors. Now these ones I've bent vertically like that, so they're all ready to go. And then each one of these 3 go between the top 2 pins of each of our MOSFETs. So on the 2 holes behind it, I put a resistor in there, so it links up with the top 2 pins, with the flat side obviously facing this way. And then I'm going to solder these in one at a time. So this one, I'm just going to splay these legs out a little bit, just so it holds in the board. Just tack those in. That's the first one in. So we're going to do the same for all 3. So again, looking at the MOSFET there, we want the top 2 legs, bend those out, not too much, they just need to be wider than the hole spacing, and it will hold it in there. So I'm going to turn the board the other way this time, so I'm going to tack the solder from this side. And then we can trim off these legs. Okay, we're almost done. That's the MOSFETs done. The next thing we need to do is give all the bottom pins at 0 volts and connect the gate to a D1 Mini connections. So we'll do that next. The next thing we need to do, the top pin of each one of these MOSFETs needs to be connected to 0 volts. Being an N-channel MOSFET, that's what it's switching. So what I did was, on some of those resistors, I did save some of the legs, and we're going to use those for jumper wires. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bend that, nice little tight 90, and then just behind that first resistor on the next pin over, the next hole over, I'm just going to drop that in there. Now, that's not going to stay there where if I turn the board upside down to solder it. What I normally do is get a bit of blue tack. Well, I can't find my blue tack, so I'm going to use a bit of tape, and I'm just going to ram that in there. It's just going to hold it while I solder that first side. So now that's in, I can take that off, and then using my tweezers, I want to line it up with the top pin of that next one down, same as this one is the top of that resistor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tweezers at roughly where that resistor is and bend it there. Do that, and then I can take this end, drop it in there, and that should, when I pull it, go reasonably flat. So again, we can solder that on. That on there, it looks like it's on there. We can cut that. So that's 0 volts on the top two. We now need to get 0 volts from here down to the bottom one. Now I'm going to need the space on this side, so I'm going to put our next jumper on this side. So same thing again, we'll take the tweezers, we'll give it a nice sharp 90 there. Again, we want the top pin and the top hole of that MOSFET there in line with that first jumper wire. Again, just going to put a bit of tape there to hold it. Not the best solder job in the world, but it's there. And then again, using the tweezers, so I'm just going to lift it up a little bit. I'm going to put the tweezers in line with the hole that I want, which is this one here. I'm going to bend it, and then I could probably cut down this lead. Actually, it's not going to make that much difference, I think. We shall try it. And then that's in that hole there, and then just using my nail, I can just pull that reasonably flat, and then we'll solder that one in, and then we'll trim that off. There you go, that's all the top pins connected together. So we've got a link there from the top to the middle, and then from the middle to the bottom. So that's all the connections there. Next thing we need to do is get 0 volts to that from our D1 Mini. Now our D1 Mini is going to be sitting this way up, and ground is on the second pin up on the right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a wire between these two, and it's ground, so we're going to use black. So I'm going to give myself more than what I need, and then what I'm doing is I'm pinching that with my nail and I'm twisting the insulation, and then holding my solder like a pencil or a pen, holding the wire in between those two fingers. I'm going to tin most of the way up from the bottom, flick the solder off there, we'll trim off the excess, and that just makes it a bit stiffer to go through the hole. So remember, the 0 volts is the second pin up, so on this side 1, 2, and we'll come in there. And then just to hold this, if I put a 90 in there, just a bit of an angle, that should give me enough stress just to hold that through the boards as I solder it. Yep, lovely. So we can trim that down, and this one's going to go up to the very top, which is the same row that our first jumper is on. So I'm just going to cut it more than what I need, and then I'm using silicone wire, which you'll find a link in the description for this stuff. It's really good because you can do this. Using my nails, I can line up like I did with the tweezers and bending. I can pinch that there and strip it, and then I can just solder most of it. I don't need all of it. There's probably halfway there. I can trim that off so I've got a nice flat edge, and then because I just like using them, I'm going to use the tweezers, and we're going to just bend that round at the end of the insulation, poke that through there, and we'll just pull it, and that should get it reasonably in line. Then we can solder that. Just a quick tack to start with, and then because it's sitting proud, I'm just going to use my finger and then push that down, reflow the solder, and there you go, that's the 0 volts. And we'll just trim that off. The next job is to wire up the gates of these MOSFETs to the outputs of the D1 Mini. Now, I did something really clever here. The gates of these MOSFETs are the middle pin. I didn't cut that track there, so that's the middle pin of the bottom MOSFET. So that one's already connected, so we just need to connect the middle pins of both of these to 2 of the pins on here. So I'm going to take a bit of wire, and like we did before, we're just going to solder that, just to make sure there's no braids sticking out. And this wire is going to go into the hole right next to D6. And remember, we cut the track there, so we need to go right next to the D1 Mini. I'm going to do the same for the next hole up, which is D5. And for that one, I used the green wire. And then all we need to do is connect it to the middle pins Oh, look at that. I've missed out a solder. Hopefully someone spotted that and has left a comment. Well, I'm not going to be able to edit that out, am I? So there you go. Even I make mistakes. Can't believe I missed that. How embarrassing. Right, so anyway, now that we're back to adding the wires, so the next two up, green's going to go in the top one, blue's going to go in the middle one, and again, as I say, both of these need to go on the gate, which is the middle pin of each one of these. And we've got plenty of space there for that, so I'm going to use the next row in. So let's do the green first. So again, going to cut it more than I need. I'm going to go roughly where that middle pin is with my nails. So I'm just going to trim that, trim most of it, and then using my tweezers, going to carefully bend that round, poke that through there, and we'll just check that is indeed on the bottom of that resistor, which is the middle pin of our MOSFET there, so we can solder that in. Next up is the blue wire, same thing. So that's the bulk of the board done. I'm going to tidy up and we'll connect the LEDs to this next. The LEDs are these things. There's a fake stopper, which has got the batteries in, and a string of LEDs. Now I bought a pack of cool whites and a pack of warm white. On my demo board, I used 2 warm and 1 cool white. So what I've got left is 2 cool and 1 warm, and we're going to use these now. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these off, and they are insulated wires. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my lighter, and I'm just going to burn off the insulation with the very tip of each one of these. Now, obviously, these are LEDs, so we need to establish which one's positive and which one's negative. My favourite way of doing that is coin cell battery. The case is positive on this one. Okay, you can see that one. So that one's positive, so I'm going to bend a 90, just to identify the negative, and we'll do the same for all of these. So connecting this to the board, we need to bring positive down to here, and I'm going to use the 5 volts, which is that bottom pin there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to short the bottom pin here to that bottom rail with a blob of solder. A nice big blob of solder there, and then just link it across. I always find when I don't want to make a solder bridge, it's easy, and when I do want to make a solder bridge, it just doesn't stick. But luckily enough, this one has. So that's that board there. I'm going to come all the way down here. I'm going to put a nice big blob of solder on the ends, like so. And then next thing I want to do is take all the positives and I'm going to wrap them all together, and then we'll put blob of solder on just to make it easier. Blob of solder on there, and then all 3 of those go on that positive rail that we made. And then it doesn't matter which order you use, it's all a random effect anyway. These need to go on the bottom pin of each one of these. So for the first one, if I hold it that way down, it's the 3rd one up. So the first MOSFET, obviously 3 pins, 1, 2, 3, that's going to be our first one, and then 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3 is going to be that one. And again, you can see that on the board there where I've connected the wires. So first one, again left-handed, so this won't match up with my diagram, but I'll keep putting it back so it does. And then we'll take the second one, clean my iron again because there's still some crap on it, clean it for a 3rd time. It's clean. I'm trying to get it the same way for you as the diagram, but it's not working. Let's use my tweezers. Okay, that worked quite well actually. I'm using the tweezers for the last one then. Not as clean as the last one, so I'm going to leave my iron on there a little bit longer. That should tin it. And then with my new skill, use the tweezers. Another thing you do as well is you just rub it with the iron on there. It should scrape away any of that plastic insulation and help it grip. All 3 are connected to positive, and the negatives go to the MOSFETs. Next thing we need to do, let's program the D1 Mini. So I'm going to take that out, put that to one side, and let's get some code. Loading up ESP Home, let's make a new device. So we don't need the web, we're going to make our own. I'm going to type in light. That makes all my lights in ESP Home grouped together. And this one I'm going to call Lantern 1. We'll go next. I'm going to choose 8266. I'm going to skip that. And here's Lantern 1 there. So let's go to edit. Next up, we need to grab some code. So on my GitHub page, I've shared the code that I've used. And we can either go to the Beadlight YAML here or the link here. It will take you to the same code block. And over here, we want to do copy raw file. So I'm going to copy that. That's copied it into the clipboard. Back to ESP Home. I'm going to select all of that. Then Control V to paste. And then we'll scroll back up the top. I'm going to take Lantern 1 name, put that in here. And then in here, I'm going to call this one Lantern Base 1. And that's it. So Control S, we're going to save that, and let's walk you through the code. So let's zoom in a little bit. So normal boilerplate for a D1 Mini with the Wi-Fi SSID and password using secrets. Now, as you've seen, I'm using a slider to control this whole setup. So the slider has minimum value of 0, maximum value of 100, 0, which is off, all the way up to a 100% brightness, or not quite. You'll see that in a second. So on value, we're doing two things. I've come up with a new way of if else. So first of all, when this value changes, it turns everything off in this lambda. So auto, which is automatic, so that's either float or integer, ESP Home will decide. Now we're using 3 different calls here for the 3 different bead lights, and you'll see these in the lights in a second. So first of all, we're going to turn off all the lights. However, if the master light.state, and you can see here master light is the name of the slider, so if this state's not equal to 0, i.e. anything other than 0, let's do something. What we're going to do is we're going to call 1, we're going to turn the beads 1 on. Again, beads 1 here is one of the lights. We're also going to set the effect that I've called random 40. Now this is a custom effect that I've made to fade the lights up and down. So just quickly, if the master light, this slider, is not 0, then turn on the light, give it the random effect, and we're doing that for all 3 beads. So that's telling it what to do. This, the call perform, is telling it to actually do it. So we set up the what we want to do, and then we set up the do it. And again, we're using 3 different call performs with 3 different calls for each one of the 3 lights. So all 3 lights are the next lot down. So these are called beads 1, 2, and 3, and they're all exactly the same, except for they've got their own individual outputs, which again I'll get to later on in the code. And then we've got the lambda effect that I've made that I've called random 40. So all this does, if the light is turned on, every 2 seconds it runs this lambda, and it's doing 2 things. First of all, again we're doing an auto, so this is again ESP Home will work out whether this is a float or an integer value. We're making a variable called slider value, and the slider value is the master light, which again, remember this is the name of our slider, the master light state, and I'm constraining it from 1 to 100 to 8 to 60. Next thing we do is make another variable, and I've called this one brightness. This is going to take the slider value, which is this value here, and then to that it's going to add a random float times 40. Now random float is a random value between 0 and 1. So at maximum it's going to be 1 times 40, which is obviously 40. It's going to add that to the slider value. So the maximum the slider value can get is 60. With the random, the maximum that the brightness can get, it's going to be a value between 60 and 100. And obviously at minimum, the brightness of the LEDs will be at most 8 plus 40, so 48%. In order to give a value to the lights, in the effect, we have to turn the lights on again. We can't just add the brightness to an on light. We have to tell the lambda which light we want to add it to. So again, we turn the light on. We do a transition length. And again, I'm using another random float. This time I'm timesing it by 1500. And in this code, 1500 is 1.5 seconds. So that's going to be anywhere from between 0 and 1.5 seconds. And I'm adding that to a 1000 is 1 second. So the transition length every 2 seconds is going to fade anywhere from 1 to 2.5 seconds. Then finally, we set the brightness. So we do a call set brightness. And the brightness in a lambda needs to be between 0 and 1 again. It can't be 100%. So this is working out 0 to 100%. So we just need to divide that by 100. And then once again, we've set up what we want to do, and we do a call perform. That's the lambda effect that I've written. The light beads 1, beads 2, and beads 3 are all exactly the same. But because it's using random, they won't all do the same thing at the same time at the same speed. The only other thing these monochromatic lights need is an output of PWM, and these are down here. So I've got one for each one of the beads, 1, 2, and 3, and these are the pin numbers that we used on the D1 Mini. And then the only other thing I've done to make this look a little bit prettier, the default on an 8266 PWM is 1000 Hertz. If the light gets a little bit low, you can see some flickering. So I've ramped that up to 3000 Hertz. That gives a smoother transition and less chance of flickering. So that's the code. We've already saved it, so let's do an install. And this is the first time we've done this one, so I'm going to do a manual download. We'll save that to the desktop so I can find it easy enough. Let's load up my ESP Home flasher. That's done. Over here, I've got a USB connected, so I'm just going to plug that into the USB port. My computer's gone bing bong bing. Let's do a quick refresh there. Click in there. There we go, COM3. And I do wish we could drag that into there, but we have to do a browse. So we'll go back to desktop. Find the Light Lantern 1 bin file, double click that, and we'll flash it. Right, that's done. That's now connected to the Wi-Fi. That's connected to the Wi-Fi, so now we can close that down. And if we go back to my Home Assistant, we should see a new device now. So we can close that down, go back to here. New device is discovered, check it out. There's our Lantern 1. Just going to configure that. I'm going to put it in the office and we'll allow that. Next, we'll go to ESP Home. We'll find the light. Quick way, if you do Control F, you can search LANT and it will find it for me. Here you can see I've resized the window just to get our slider a little bit more visible so we can have our video down here. Take D1 Mini, plug that into our board, connect up the USB to there, and we'll plug it in. And just give that a couple of seconds to get on the Wi-Fi. That should be working now. So if I bring it up a little bit, we can see the lights come on, and if I turn the desk lamp down a little bit, we'll probably see them fading a little bit better. That's roughly its minimum brightness. Remember, the minimum it will go to is 8. So if I put it in less than 5, that's going to be its minimum brightness. Anything less than 5 on these PWMs, the lights really don't come on. So that's one of the reasons why I restricted it. And if we put it all the way up to 100, remember it's every 2 seconds, so there is a slight delay. And although they're blurring out the camera, you can probably just see them fading. And then once they're spread out and on your shelves, you'll see that a little bit better. So put it down to 40 and you'll see them roughly 2 seconds, and then they fade nicely in and out at random brightness and at random transitions, so they don't all go at the same time, so they're all fairly random. So there you go, that works. Well, I hope this video was helpful for your projects. Please do share it so others can find it as well. I upload videos whenever I can, so subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified. That's it. Thanks for watching.